Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. We are on episode 132. I am, as always, H.A. Conrad here with my intrepid and wonderful co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Morning, H.A. What's up? How you doing?
I think you need some more coffee. There's a long pause there.
I don't need more coffee. What I need is my hour of sleep back. Thank you.
Yeah, this is always a terrible thing. I feel like they should just leave it alone and not do this weird thing they do every year. But what can we do? We can't fight City Hall.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't referring to daylight savings. I meant come and take my children.
Oh.
It's a common misconception. People with small children, like daylight savings will throw off their internal clocks and everything. But guess what? They get up every 2 hours anyway. So
doesn't matter.
Yeah, I live in a permanent state of, it must be daylight savings because I have not gotten nearly enough sleep.
Yep, automatic alarm clocks going off at all hours. That's kind of rough. I did not have that going on. I had a leisurely sleep in and went up to get my bagel and coffee. It was delicious. I feel pretty relaxed right now.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous of the bagel.
Yeah, the bagel. I'll bring you some out if I think of it. We live in a good bagel neighborhood. But bagels aside, we are talking today about the sequel to a film that we discussed a long time ago, REC. And this is REC2, not REC squared, as some people have joked about, just the way it looked, I guess, in some of the promo materials did look like REC squared. But
I only just put that together because, it's the used superscript on the
yep.
two. Okay,
Yep.
Well, lesson learned.
But I will tell you that, you had mentioned that we should watch this, and I was like, yeah, no problem. And, fully forgetting that this was the demonic possession variety zombies, if you can call them that. I'm not sure that they really fit that description. I feel like this is more of a possession movie, but still very well done. And I ended up having to watch this twice because unfortunately I had to delay our recording, so I wanted to remind myself of a few things. And still pretty rough for me. The demonic children possession thing, still don't like it any more than I did before. But
it's definitely demonic, but it uses a transmission more akin to our zombies, which is why I think it's still definitely a contender.
It is. No, it is. I mean, you can. That's the great thing about zombie films and some of the different things that they do is that you can kind of make it fit whatever canon you want, depending on where you're going with it. It's a little bit versatile. So in any case, we're talking about that today. But before we get to our review, we have a couple of news items. Do you want to kick it off with the first one, Stuart?
Yeah, sure. So what do we got? This has been big news. And this is exciting news. This is news that kind of suggests that South Korea, other than ousting corrupt leaders, might be becoming the capital of zombie culture, like globally, based on Train to Busan, the fact that, people are saying that the genre is only gaining momentum in South Korea. So they have announced through Netflix a medieval zombie show coming to, I already said Netflix, which is very exciting news. So I am super pumped. I think they're pretty much still in early days. There's nothing you can even look at yet, no stills. But what was it going to be called? Do you remember?
The medieval Korean zombie show.
Yes. Kingdom.
It was Kingdom. Yeah.
Yes.
It does look very cool, though, I have to say. It really is kind of impressive. And the fact that they are... I wonder what's going on. And, I mean, is it a cultural thing that this is making this sort of the epicenter of zombie culture? It's interesting that it's taken off so much. I don't want to read too much into the political pieces of it, but I do think that could play into it a little bit.
Certainly, Train to Busan had a lot of political and cultural subtext for current events when that script was put together. what I like about doing it in as a period piece is it's so rarely done.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to think of it as being a near future scenario, and so it's going to be very interesting, and it'll be a real nice departure from the norm to make it. It's going to be set in the Joseon dynasty, which was 14th to 19th century, a huge chunk of time, but also really long time ago. So pretty pumped.
Yep. Um, so I'm psyched to see how this unfolds. So very excited to see that news tidbit. In other news, there there was this incident. Did you see this? I
Yeah.
had I it's one of those things, but basically a radio station in Indiana was hacked, and the hackers issued alerts about a zombie outbreak. I don't know that people really thought there was a zombie outbreak, but I think they thought there might be some kind of an outbreak. And in any case, the sheriff's department had to like step in and basically say, no, there was no outbreak, no outbreak here, nothing to see here, or was there? Just say. Um,
It's just the beginning of the cover up, right?
it could be. In any case, it's just kind of interesting that that's what they chose to do, but all good. Just in time for Illinois' Zombie Preparedness Month, which is yet another sort of PSA attempt to get people to prepare for disasters. I don't know that this is ever going to go away, where they're going to try to make it cool by making it about zombies and not about tornadoes, but but there you have it. Then in other news, I found this little interesting, not a little just blurb about this modular house, like it's it's a design for a 3D printed mobile house. And this was in TechCrunch, so it was kind of funny. It's this company, and I think they do this as a competition just to see what kind of energy efficient and more environmentally friendly housing they can do that's easy for people to put together. And the idea behind these kinds of houses and contests are mainly for people who might be in, for example, like during Hurricane Katrina, or in areas where you can't necessarily get the proper materials together and that kind of thing. However, the twist that this company did was that they have a zombie preparedness model where they include extra features on the house design, which include like armored glazing, alarm systems, extra toilet paper, which I thought was funny, extra toilet paper storage, and of course a Bible, which I don't know that's going to help you with a zombie outbreak unless it is, of course, in line with what we are seeing in REC2. But aside from the silliness of this, I feel like the model, or the idea of the model, is pretty cool. It is basically it has solar panels, a water system, so it's like, and not just you don't need necessarily a water source. It actually takes water from the air quality control, and then it's all recyclable. And so it's just kind of an interesting idea to see what people can do with technology. Did you happen to watch the little promo video?
Yeah, it's pretty janky. They've got the music down with the little hinky dink
Yeah.
music, but then the video, it's just like panning around seemingly at random. And they never show the bed, which was kind of annoying. There's the sofa, and then they end with a shot of some pastries.
With the company name on it.
Mm.
So but what's interesting about it is that it's kind of small. You can transport it pretty
It's
easily.
34 square meters inside, which is about 365 square feet, which sounds small, but I've lived in smaller apartments.
Right. But the interesting, I love the thermal, how much it conserves energy. It's the walls they liken to brick, so you could actually live in a cold climate off the grid. And so that's kind of the idea behind it. But anyway, I thought this
I'd
was
like
kind of
to
cool.
know more about the plumbing. I mean, I can see like, yeah, you've got solar on the roof. There's clearly an air conditioning heating unit
Hmm.
on one end, but then there's a washer and dryer and shower and stuff. And there was some mention about get grabbing ambient fluid or water from the from the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if it has to be plumbed, like hooked up.
Yeah, I don't know. I wondered if it was like some of the tiny houses where they don't actually have a plumbing system. They just have those kind of compost toilets, which are kind of gross. If you have to live in a tiny space with them, not the most. Not it does not keep the air as clean, but maybe this is something a little different. But just from a cost point of view, I mean, 60,000 pounds, which is not necessarily cheap, but for something like this that is so, energy efficient and easily transportable, it's not the most expensive thing in the world. Especially if you're talking about you're not just talking about like a house itself. You're talking about self-sufficient systems and energy, and not needing to hook this little guy up to the grid. That's kind of a cool idea. So, I I know they're being kind of silly about it, but I actually was excited to see this, and I wonder what other designs are going to come out there. So the other thing, I don't know, I did not put this in the notes, but did you see that scientists were experimenting with drones to pollinate plants?
No, I have not heard about this.
Which, considering what's going on with the honeybees, may be an interesting solution, although I don't think that it would save everything, because there are specific plants and flowers that just can't. The only thing that can actually pollinate them that's delicate enough are the bees, but maybe it's just a matter of finding a drone tiny enough. I don't know. So anyway, technology, love it. And then you put in something about the Walking Dead tribute zombie gallery, which I had seen as well. It's just kind of interesting, the sort of the fan service and the cameos that they put in there, and we've talked a little bit about this before. Just some of the fun that the makeup artists and things have about throwing in some interesting tributes to prior films. So it's kind of cool when you look at it.
Yeah, and we've noted some of those star zombies every so often when we see them in Walking Dead, but frankly, I miss, based on that gallery, there's just more that I'm missing than I'm seeing, and I'm not as good at picking out some of these classic zombies either. And there's still a couple of the classic films that I haven't seen out there, which is something we should still try to amend.
I picked out quite a few of these during the course of the show. I was giggling about the Ed zombie from Shaun of the Dead, which is a newer zombie tribute, obviously, but I just thought that was pretty funny. And then the American Werewolf in London one, I definitely caught. That's one of my favorite weird sort of cheesy movies. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah, it's one of the first movies I ever saw.
Although it actually, when I saw that guy in there, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, because I don't really think about I think of him more as a ghost in the film as opposed to a zombie, but he is kind of a zombie because he's decomping and stuff like that, decomposing and all that. But, I love the fact that they just throw these guys in there as references for the fans. It's kind of, I love it so much. It's pretty awesome. And then you want to take the last thing that you put in there, which is not technically zombie related, tangentially. We've talked a little bit about before, but
yeah. So we had mentioned before that Sonequa Martin Green, Sasha Williams from The Walking Dead, was cast a while back as Lieutenant Commander something on the Discovery Star Trek coming up. So. They've recently announced. The thing is that what's kind of weird about this is so they picked her out. They're like, she's the lead, Lieutenant Commander Rainsford, but she's not the captain. So it's an interesting dynamic they're setting up from the get-go, where now Jason Isaacs has been announced as Captain Lorca, he is a very recognizable actor, probably for me best known as that guy who killed. Oh my goodness, why am I terrible at names now?
Because you're getting old. When we get old, this is what happens. We lose our
Mel
memories.
Gibson's son in The Patriot. He's the one who casually murders
Heath Ledger. Yes,
a teenage. No, it wasn't Heath Ledger. It might have killed him later, but he casually murders some other kid one of Mel Gibson's other multiple sons in The Patriot at the beginning of the movie that propels him to
Oh.
go on a murderous rage.
Yeah, he
Uh,
eventually does, I think, kill Heath Ledger, his other son, later on, which just makes Mel Gibson just lose his mind.
well,
So,
this is why Mel Gibson has multiple children. I think he has four sons in this film,
hmm.
and then a
Ha-
daughter.
I'm wondering if this is a situation where the captain, something happens to him, and maybe Lieutenant Commander Rainsford takes over. That's my one of my thoughts about it. But
IMDb
there,
is saying that Lorca is in 13 episodes, which is all
mm,
they have for the whole season. I mean, I'm sure that that's just not like all hammered out yet. They're still in pre-production, but it's going to be an interesting dynamic if Rainsford has to keep going to this other character to be like, "Sir, can I do this? I'm the
or
star. I'm the
Or,
star."
it could, depending on what the storyline is, it could be, something where maybe he's like in a coma for some episodes. I don't. However, the rest of the cast, really interesting cast. The person that I was very excited about, is the fact that they have cast Michelle Yeoh as Captain Georgiou, because she is one of my favorite action heroes, and she's pretty awesome.
Captain Georgiou?
Well, not the captain, but Michelle Yeoh. I mean,
Oh, of
man,
course.
she's one of my favorites. Motorcycles onto trains and all. But they've got it's a pretty star-studded cast. And then some oldies but goodies. Anthony Rapp, who I don't know if you remember, but he did a lot of Broadway for a while. But before that, I think he made his sort of film debut in Adventures in Babysitting, and then got very famous in a variety of musicals. But the one he is most known for is, and now my mind is going, Rent.
Yeah.
So
Well, he was one of the original cast, right?
Right. But then, he did stuff like Beautiful Mind and, a lot of other stuff. But Rent is definitely what I associate him with, and as well as Adventures in Babysitting. I'm sure he'd love to hear that. That's what people associate him with. But I am fully in to watch the show. I'm always up for another Star Trek series. So this is looking, plus the people who are creating it. Brian Fuller is one of the co-creators and producers, and I think he is just phenomenal, and always a big fan of his work. So
Gene Roddenberry. Is Gene Roddenberry still alive?
I think this must be his son.
Gene Jr.?
Oh, no, or maybe they're just giving him the character credit, maybe. Yeah.
For 9 episodes.
Yeah, because they must be bringing in some of his other characters because he is long dead. I thought maybe it was his son, but no, it is not. It is actually him.
Okay. Another cast that's a cast member who's mentionable is Malik Pancholi, who's playing, I assume, the ship's doctor, Dr. Nambu. The doctors tend to be an interesting character on any Star Trek show. And so this guy was, in my mind, most famous for being Jack Donaghy's personal assistant in 30 Rock. Mm-hmm. So not a huge likable character, but very funny, and it's also good to have someone with a good comedic timing on any of these shows.
Well, and I can't help but mention the very, very creepy Doug Jones, who is going to be in this. He's one of those character actors that he's very, very good at everything he does, but always freaks me out a little bit. Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy.
So he does a lot in prosthetics, I guess. Is that?
Yeah, he does a ton of that. So like if you saw him in he's just been like a ton of super creepy stuff. I feel like he might have also been in like Buffy the Vampire Slayer as this super like creepy. They had this episode called Hush, and there were these things called the Gentlemen, and they looked terrifying, and they were all I think he played multiple of them, and they just kind of floated around the town and nobody could speak and they'd kill you. It was like super disturbing. So always like his work, but he adds a level of creepiness that I'm curious, he's playing like a normal or I think maybe a normal like ship, like he's a plane or lieutenant here. So
But he
maybe
could
he
be an
could.
alien.
Maybe he could be. We don't know yet. And then also, did you see that Kurtzman is one of the co-creators of this as well? So that's going to be interesting.
Elaborate.
So he is a very well-known writer and producer. It's interesting. He's had a part or a piece of the productions of some of the newer Star Trek movies. So to have him on board here, it's interesting that they're coupling him with Brian Fuller. So I'm curious to see how much involvement both of them have. Whether this is going to have more of a Brian Fuller feel or more of like the film, if they're trying to do something with a continuity with the films. So, generally I
Cool.
like him. I think that he does pay a lot of attention to the history of Star Trek, and definitely there's a lot of fan service there that I think he plays into. Sometimes I think a little too much, but I think it'll be a good thing to have him on board.
So what's to me kind of interesting also about this cast list is that these are a lot of known entities, a lot of famous people, people who are not going to be cheap. And
Nope.
and that is kind of a departure from this franchise where with the exception of Scott Bakula and maybe Patrick Stewart who had done some work but wasn't really known for television, the those casts were essentially unknowns even though they were established actors because they're in the middle of their career in a lot of ways. But this is like people that Sonequa Martin Green's coming off a top-rated television show, like and Jason Isaacs is film, and uh, Anthony Rapp is super famous and probably has Tonys. So this is
And
this is
Michelle
different. What do
Yeoh,
you?
Michelle
Yeah,
Yeoh is
Michelle
not
Yeoh,
cheap.
obviously international kung fu star, although she's probably not going to be doing a lot of kung fu, I assume, as a
Oh
captain.
man, I hope she is. That would be awesome. Well, I think that some of the money that they probably have gotten for this, and maybe why they can afford such a star-studded cast, is that I suspect that this. I mean, I could be wrong, but maybe this is not going to be. Maybe they are looking at this more as a sort of similar to a BBC series where it's going to be short and sweet, and they're not going to do like season after season, although that is definitely what Star Trek fans want with the Star
Hmm.
Trek series. But maybe also part of it is that the popularity of the films have allowed, there's so much support and so much fan interest that maybe they've been able to just bankroll like a ton of money and get a ton of funding for this, which is, I think, has to be true given the names associated. I think you're right about that.
Dude, I feel like you're onto something. If they make this an anthology show,
Hmm.
a la True Detective, so you can get in massive star power every year. Could be a different, either even a different ship. This is
Right?
a bottomless, story writing enterprise. That could be amazing. But
It could be amazing or it could be bad. So
also True
I'm
Detective.
hoping for, yeah, the True Detective. I truly enjoyed that first season. Admittedly, I was not totally psyched about how they wrapped up the first season, but I still was very excited about the second season, and I couldn't even finish it. I don't know about you, but I just thought it was terrible. It was just honestly, I felt like it was one of the most poorly executed shows when they had such goodwill and they had such fan buy-in. To me, it was their sort of, they were set up for success, and they just couldn't make it work. Though I have to hope with Star Trek, just because there's so much to work with in that universe, I think there's so much flexibility, and that's why you've seen so many different series related to it, that you kind of have some continuity, but you can kind of create your own thing. So I think that this could be a model for success. I am, as you know, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, though I don't think my depth of knowledge is as much as, say, my friend Ali. So I have not yet talked to him about what he thinks about it. So I wonder if he has a different take. But right now, I'm very open to seeing how this goes, and I'm always excited to see a new Star Trek series come out.
Yeah. Well, we should probably get off the sci-fi and back
Yeah.
to zombies.
All right. I'm trying to just procrastinate and avoid talking about demonic freaking possessed children. So,
Yeah.
all good.
So this film, REC2, it came out in 2010 in a Spanish film, just like REC was. Uh, and while the American version, Quarantine, also got a sequel, the two have nothing to do with each other anymore. I mean, the original Quarantine sequel, the original Quarantine spinoff was pretty close to REC,
Yep.
pretty close. But then they definitely diverge. There were eventually four REC movies, and so yeah, like I said, this one came out in 2010. The original came out in 2008. They started filming this in 2009. They were just like, we got a hit, let's just do
Let's
it,
do
and
it.
then they announced the other two sequels. I think also in 2010 coming out in they came out in 2012 and 2014. This one has the same writer and director and several returning cast members from the first one, which is surprising because almost everybody no everybody dies in the first one as far as we can tell.
Yeah. And well, we'll talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
It didn't make a lot of money worldwide as far as Box Office Mojo can tell. It made $18.5 million, most of that being in Spain. I think it only made like 30 grand in the US. But it made its rounds of the horror film festivals and was shown a lot of places. I don't know that it won anything, which I don't know what it was up against, but I feel like to me this was a good movie. This was like edge of my seat. Glad I watched it during the day, which is always a sign of a good horror film.
Yeah,
Um,
I only watch this specific type of film during the day. I just can't go to bed thinking about demon children. But no, I agree with you. I was very surprised to see that they hadn't picked up some awards because I do think that it's very hard to do a sequel. It's hard to do a series of films that have all this. I mean, the gimmick here, as in like Blair Witch and all this other stuff, is that it's a little bit. They don't really say it's found footage, although that's implied, but it's the shaky cam, like reporter or whoever, and in this case, or some of the rescue SWAT team that's going in to see what happened in the building have their helmet cams, but that's sort of the perspective of what the film is. It's very hard to make that not get old really fast. And I feel like they actually succeeded in making this a really interesting and terrifying, honestly, film. Like the jump scares were just throughout and didn't really get tired. I do think that they could have done a slightly better job cutting down some of the editing because there is a lot of like kind of retreading the same ground. But I think some of that's for the benefit of people who maybe didn't see the first film. But
can you imagine coming into this?
yeah,
Honestly, even as much as they try to do, they start with the end. The final scene of the first movie is the first scene of this film,
mm-hmm.
with the woman in on the infrared or the low light level camera getting dragged into the darkness. But then we cut to we suddenly then we're with the SWAT guys, and then we're inside the building, and inside the building, as far as sets go, I
It's
don't
a
know if they
great
got the same
set.
build. I don't know if they got the same building. It looks very similar, but
I don't
just
think it looked slightly to me. It looked slight, and I'd have to go back and admittedly I did not, and I probably should have watched the first one again.
well, they should. Yeah, it's all different angles. Like
Yeah,
we're not looking at anything the same way exactly that we were the first time, so it's hard to tell.
but that I think they can get away with it for that reason. But to me, because they shot it in a different way, it still felt claustrophobic. But the first film had a level of crampedness and feeling shut in, and this one had it, but not to the same extent. The first one I remember watching and just feeling extraordinarily uncomfortable because it did feel very much like they did a great job at putting the audience member in that building with them or feeling as if you were and just desperately just wanting to get out,
Hmm.
and feeling like you're being kind of like smothered and not able to get out, and so it increased sort of the level of anxiety, and I still think they have it here. It just wasn't quite as successful, and I do think that the set may possibly have been different, for that reason. Like the stairwells
Hmm.
looked a little wider to me.
It did feel a little wider. I agree.
So, and again, it could have been the same building. I have no idea. I guess we'll have to look into that. But I think part of it was the way they filmed it in this. And I think some of the reasoning for that is that they had a lot more they had a lot of ground to cover in this, and they had a lot of characters to kind of keep moving and to keep their storylines going. And so I think they had to, in some ways, increase the different camera angles and the way they were filming it in order to give you the sort of full lay of the land. Um,
They do have a lot of ground to cover. I think that's an important point because also from a story perspective, they just kind of skip over a lot of what I would
yes.
consider to be first steps, like clear the building.
Yep.
Like, so we meet these four SWAT guys, and they all have helmet cams, and then Rosso has, so it's Lara, the chief, Martos, Rosso. Rosso's the one with the camera, like the main camera. They all have helmet cams, and we use those, in every so often in the film. But Rosso's carrying a big, like movie camera for some reason. I think towards the end of the film, he switches to a rifle, or actually no, he switches to a different camera. I don't know that he ever has a gun, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I don't think he does. It doesn't feel like that, or it's never referenced, which is a little unusual given the situation that they're in. But
He's in a team of four. They've given up 25% of their firepower just to have a guy with a camera when they all have helmet cams. It does, to me, I was just like, why does that guy have a movie camera? That doesn't make any sense. He's a cop.
well, I mean, I think part of what they tried to imply, not entirely successfully, is that so one of the people that is in there with them, Owen, is like I think they think he's part of this other team or like kind of a
Well,
hazmat
they
maybe.
think he's from the Ministry of Health, but
Yeah,
that
yeah.
turns out not to be the case.
Well, it's not the case, but what their impression is, and I think he requested to have a like basically somebody filming and recording this, possibly for reasons that the Ministry of Health, or whatever storyline he gave them, they needed somebody to document that. So that was sort of what I thought they were getting at with having a cameraman in there without a gun.
Hmm.
So
So Owen is an interesting character and an interesting actor in that he's an English guy, or maybe he's Welsh, and but speaking Spanish the whole time, except for I think in one scene he switches to English for like one line, and he speaks Spanish with a very clear English accent, which
yes, he
I thought
does.
was very interesting. And this actor, Jonathan Meller, apparently that's kind of his shtick. He does acting in Spain. I think he plays the English guy in a lot of stuff. So this was no exception. And I was surprised that I could tell, I guess, as someone who doesn't speak Spanish, that, and the fact that they called him Owen is clearly not a Spanish name, but it was, for a foreign film, it still got kind of a lot of a message across to me. And I was always like, wait, a guy called Owen working for the Spanish Ministry of Health? That doesn't seem very likely. Uh,
Well, I do think that there was an interesting choice and decision that they made to do that, and I think that it was very clear that he was an outsider even from the beginning.
yeah.
I also noticed the accent, and I don't speak Spanish either, so it was just very noticeable that from the beginning that he wasn't exactly what he was purporting to be. So that
Hmm.
was kind of a cool idea and casting choice, and plus he's a super cool looking dude.
Yeah, he's very intense. I feel like he was made to play an exorcist priest, which is ultimately what he turns out to be, right? He's from the Vatican, an agent of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, it's like you have super intense, like cut, chiseled cheekbones, and you got this little haggard look about you, like you haven't slept in a while. I guess I'll make you the exorcist priest. Like
Hmm.
he definitely had that. He had that look and that vibe about him. So
So they hook up with this guy, and he's kind of like, yeah. It's strange the dynamic between the chief and Owen, but it becomes clear very quickly that Owen is running this show, and he's telling them what to do. And they're like, maybe we should check downstairs. He's like, no, we're going straight
yeah,
upstairs. And so they go into the last room we kind of see in the film, in the original film, where all the evidence is, right? And they're like looking for evidence, and he keeps telling people like, you got to film this. Look at what we're doing, like barking orders at the cameraman.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it's interesting because they get to that room so quickly, and this,
yeah,
in the first film, this is obviously the penultimate scene when they get up there and into that room, and it took them the whole film to get there. It's just funny that they just were like, okay, we're gonna get there immediately with all these people. and we're gonna basically go over exactly what's going on here. And they quickly find the newspaper clippings regarding the girl that was possessed, and he's finding all the evidence around of what the priest had been doing, like his experiments, and conveniently finds the recording just at the spot where the priest is talking about the fact that the demonic possession virus has mutated. So it's just kind of it was a little bit funny for me anyway to see that, and like, wow, you guys just get handed it all to us immediately. And my initial impression was where are you going to go from here? And it did, they, to their credit, they did a great job, but it was just kind of funny that it's like, okay, we're in the room, this is where we're going, bang, here you go, audience, this is all this information. So
they hit you up with like the final chapter of the first film, and then suddenly we hear music from downstairs, and so everybody like runs out of the the attic or the office in the top floor, runs downstairs. And then the SWAT team does this thing that kind of pisses me off, where the chief keeps sending one guy into a house by himself.
Yeah, like, I don't know that any team would actually do that, right?
I'm pretty sure that's not, it's not how that works.
Also, just from a horror movie canon watching trope, whatever, nothing's creepier than some weird music on a record coming from some unknown apartment. Like, you just hear the strains of the music.
It started after they got in there too.
Yeah. Right. I don't know that I would be sending just one guy at a time to explore that, but hey, maybe these guys don't watch horror films.
Yeah, so this is, I think it's Lara. He's the one with the shotgun, and he goes in, he's like, oh yeah, it looks clear. And but then he sees a lady, he shoots the lady, but then the lady's on him, and we're seeing all this through his helmet cam.
Right.
So we've switched from the main camera to helmet cam, and there's a lot of camera switching in this movie, way more than we ever got in the first one, and maybe that takes away a little bit from the cohesiveness of this film. But at the same time, it's they like try to explain it by saying, cut him in, Rosso. So Rosso is like operating some switches on his camera that allow everybody else in the ensemble to watch as Lara gets eaten by a demon zombie. And then they run in.
Because everybody needs to see that.
They're like, what's happening to that one guy we sent in there by himself? Oh, he's dying. We should run in there now.
We should run in there. Let's send another lone person in. And I thought, I kept feeling like they were switching around the cameras like that to keep it lively, and also to kind of keep the level of confusion going, because there is a lot of confusion. They also can hide a lot of, they have a lot of leeway to hide some stuff or cut in some stuff by editing the way they did. So like the different perspectives, it does make it a little scarier when you don't see, exactly what is going on when everything's kind of dark and quick and fast moving. I also would just say, from a budget point of view, they don't have to spend as much money on the makeup because you don't need all those details. And it's still pretty scary to see this kind of weird face coming out of there with a little bit of blood and whatever, but you don't need to get as detailed as with other zombie films where you're kind of doing those close-up and high definition shots. So so I thought that was part of the reasoning too. But I also think that maybe they did this as a way to differentiate it from the first film and to show that there was like a team there. But they overdid it a little bit, I'd say.
Did you feel like it was too much? Yeah. By the end, you're like, oh my God, how many more camera people or how many more camera switches can we do? But I think, I think there's 6 different cameras if you count the helmet cams that we get to go to. So sorry, it wasn't Lara. Lara's kind of like the badass of the group, but he's also like the one who gets very, very up in everybody's face, yelling, "What's going on? What is going on?" But he also kind of takes care of business up until his exit scene. So the guy they send in is Martos, and Martos gets sent inside by himself. He gets got. Then they go in, and he's already turned. He's just standing at the end of the hallway. Martos has a few scenes where he's standing.
Just standing there
somewhere, and people run into him. But then things take another turn when they're like trying to keep him under control, and then Owen starts praying at him, and he goes kind of complacent, and then suddenly you're in a different movie from the first one, because nobody tried praying at the zombies in the first film, but when Owen starts praying at him, it makes a big difference, and then they can lock him in a bedroom, put a rosary on the door with a knife, and call it a day. They just leave him
Well,
in there.
and my thought when I saw this is like, number one weapon of trying to placate these demonic whatever they are, rosary with a knife on the door. Why don't you just have like a whole bunch of those and hand them out to everybody if
Yeah.
that's gonna placate these things. The other thing that why not just have that and tell them all that this is something that could actually work. I don't know if they actually need to say words or whatever he was saying, that the kind of exorcism type of prayer he was saying to do that. So maybe they all couldn't do it. But my God, I think I would probably be like, hey, can I have like 10 of those things, 20 of those things? Just put them all around myself and call it a day. But the transmission of, so when he goes in and sees the kind of, obviously infected woman, the transmission, like from the time that she like bites him or whatever happens to his turning, it seemed faster to me than in the other film, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think it does seem faster, yeah,
Okay.
because they're right outside the door. They run in, and he's already full zombie.
And I wondered if this, I mean, I was trying to figure out ways, I always do this, like ways to explain differences like this. And, I guess you could explain this by the virus or enzyme being more mutated and by whatever entity this is gaining a little bit more power.
Hmm.
But this one is pretty fast moving, where the other one, there's a lot of time between somebody getting bitten and becoming like this sort of possessed creature. And the example I'd use is the little girl Jennifer. Took
Yeah,
a really long time, like
that
almost
was
the
like three
whole
quarters of
film,
the film. Yeah,
to
yeah.
happen. And in this one, it happens in like 5 seconds. So,
And in this movie, so yeah, we have Martos who turns, it seems like within seconds, and then later on there's Ori
yep,
who turns within maybe 35 seconds to a minute, somewhere in that range,
yep.
because he goes from being bit to then they have like a long conversation with him when he's a demon
Right.
zombie. And yeah, like you said, the little girl is the best example because she was just like, oh, I don't feel very well, like at the beginning of the film, and
Mm-hmm.
then she's eating her mom,
Yeah.
as they do. So then after the crucifix scene and the praying scene, they run back upstairs again to like continue the search for evidence or blood. As it turns out, they need the blood of the original possessed person. And this is, I think, where Lara starts screaming and the chief starts screaming at Elwyn. They're all like, "What's going on?" I'm like, dude, you just saw someone pray at a crazy version of your ex-colleague and then lock him in a room with a crucifix. So what do you think is going on? Like, how much of an explanation do you really need at this point?
Yeah, that was, and honestly, do you really need an explanation? Let's just like let's do what he says and get the hell out of here, since he was the only one who seemed to have any knowledge about stopping or slowing these things. So,
Yeah, but in one of these like first person or these like video camera perspective films, people running up to each other and screaming at each other's faces is kind of that's
par-
par for the course, right?
well, and it's how they do their exposition, and it's a little bit sloppy and lazy in my opinion, but there it is. And the other thing that they do that's kind of interesting, not interesting, but was an interesting choice with this film, is that they basically have like a couple of timelines. So there's like different characters that you're watching, and then you see all these other characters, and then they backtrack and show sort of what had been happening to them earlier. They do a little bit of a flashback,
Yeah.
or a reset. I don't even know what you would call that, but it was something that surprised me a little bit. And this is the part where I felt like it got overly complicated, and I'm not sure that they
With the
necessarily.
teenagers?
Yeah, I don't know that they needed to do that. You don't need
But
to
they
show.
yeah. But before we even get to them, there's the whole going up into the ceiling ducts with the children. You're probably just trying not to remember that scene.
Yes, actually, you totally caught me, because I really also, where the hell did all those children come from?
There were like four of them up there. Yeah, and then
Yeah, like
there's
where, and also where did all these people in this building come from? Because in the last film, we saw pretty much everybody, or what we thought was everybody. Maybe there was definitely some people hiding out, I guess, in the ceiling ducts, but I thought we had captured and followed the stories of everybody that we knew about in this building, but you know.
But nobody was alive.
Yeah,
But
I guess.
they're all zombies. I mean, everybody left in the building is a zombie.
Yeah,
The only people who aren't are those who've come in from the outside. But
true.
yeah, so there's the scene where right before we get introduced to the teenagers is includes Lara, which kind of cements his position as the team badass, going up into the ceiling and crawling through a duct and finding a refrigerator, as you
Hmm.
do, with blood samples in it in the ceiling duct, and then coming back down, being chased by zombie children, and making it out in one piece. It's just kind of a miraculous scene of badassery that you're like, all right, Lara, even though you keep screaming "What's going on" to people, you're okay in my book. Um,
Yeah, the piece of this scene that was really funny is that they're like, "Go up there," and
this
his
is all the
initial,
chief ever does. The chief is just
"Go
like,
up there."
you go by yourself. That's kind of his thing.
Sorry,
So
it was really funny because he's just like, Laura does pause for a minute before going up there, but it was just like, yeah, I'd do it. I'd take a hell of a pause before before going up into this ceiling duct.
yeah, and he barely gets out.
Yeah.
And then they walk out of the lab again. I can't remember when they light everything on fire. I think it's during this time too. But they walk out of the lab and there's a guy out there, and they shoot him and throw him over the edge of the stairwell. And that's when we see down below that there are other people who also have a camera on the stairwell.
Right.
And it's close to this point. I think the cops try to chase him downstairs and be like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" or whatever. And then we suddenly switch perspective
Right.
because
But
also Rose.
this is also part of the whole thing with the blood and it lighting on fire. One piece
Yeah.
that I thought was kind of just ridiculous is like, okay, so if you're like this priest guy and you know that doing your prayer or whatever you're trying to say over it is going to have a reaction, wouldn't you then separate the other vial so that it wouldn't light on fire? Like if it's something that's that like
Yeah.
volatile. Anyway, I
Maybe
mean,
he's never done it before.
I know this is what sets it up because then they have to find more blood, and that's what like kind of leads them down into the stairwell because
Hmm.
they're looking for their infected friend. But it was just sort of that did seem a little bit silly to me. But
There's
you know,
blood all over this apartment building too. It's on
and
every surface.
and it was unclear to me. Well, I guess it's clear because they keep trying to find it, but apparently they need it from a live specimen. So that's
Right.
the key, right? Because otherwise they could just take it out of any one of these things, but apparently it needs to be somebody that is or alive slash possessed, infected,
Hmm.
undead, mobile, I guess, animated.
Right.
But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to take you off kilter. So anyway,
Not at all.
stairwell, kids.
So right after we meet the kids, the cops start running downstairs. Oh, actually, this is when, yeah. So we run downstairs. They're looking for the kids. They can't find them. They go in. Lara gets sent into an apartment by himself to clear it. And so
Again,
he's doing that, and then suddenly a whole bunch of other zombies come running from upstairs towards what's left of our group, which is Rosso, the chief, and Owen. Lara is off by himself. We have a little bit of helmet cam from him saying, "Yeah, it looks clear," whatever. And then we the rest of the team go across the hallway and lock themselves in another apartment.
hmm
And then we have this amazing scene. Well, included in this zombie gang who come downstairs are people that we would recognize from the first film. Like there's a guy in a fireman
yep,
jacket with an axe who's like hitting his axe on the stair railing, which is kind of terrifying.
yes.
And I'm not sure if it's the same actor, but it definitely could have been. I think this is
It could have been, and they imply that it is. And I mean, it's the film footage is shaky enough that it doesn't necessarily need to be, but you
sure.
recognize him from like the first film, so at least the idea of him.
Yeah.
So
So inside this apartment now, they're like, "Oh God, Lara's out there. We're switch to cut him in, cut him in." So they look at him and his perspective, and you see him walking through the apartment with his gun up, and then suddenly seeing that zombies are coming into the apartment, and then there's like two or three more of them in there already,
yep,
in the one that he's supposed to have been clearing, um, and then he gets trapped in the bathroom, and there's a very impactful scene, I feel like, of him looking in the mirror with his helmet cam and eating his pistol.
well, yeah, and I mean, as the infected, possessed people are trying to it's like they have part of the door off. It's very much a like the Shining moment where
Yeah.
here, yeah, like here's Johnny. They I feel like the footage of him in that apartment trying to clear the possessed people and trying to get away from them is very well done.
Yeah.
It's really terrifying because it's like
yeah.
he starts to get ahead of them because he is a badass, and he just gets totally overwhelmed, and it's really scary. I mean, him trying to outrun them and finally finding the solace in the bathroom. I actually thought that there was going to be somebody in like the shower because they had the shower curtain kind of closed, speaking of The Shining, and I was like, man, is this like The Shining references here? But they didn't do that, but it was still very, as you said, it was like a very impactful scene where the way that the camera work is done with him looking in the mirror and also being able to see what's behind him and what's coming, what's basically his choice. He doesn't really have one. And in this part where he couldn't get out, he couldn't even open the bathroom window.
Mm-hmm.
Although, don't you feel like he maybe could have done that if he tried harder? But it's not just what he does to himself, it's the fact that everybody else is cut in and watching what he's doing here.
Yeah.
So it's pretty horrible.
Yeah. The chief is like, hey dude, you still have your pistol, use your pistol, but he meant like shoot your way out. Instead, Lara goes and shoots himself in the face, and I thought that was incredible. And it's like a 1 minute little cut in helmet cam scene, but it's really good. Yep. With zombies coming from every direction, and he's just not able to break out of there. And meanwhile, his three buddies, well, two buddies and Owen are just kind of like hanging out in another apartment, not helping him. It was tough.
Well, because once again, he was sent in all alone. And the interesting thing about what I thought was good about the way the chief kept saying, use your pistol. Well, Lara knows full well what situation he's in, and he knows that he's not going to be able to get out of there with just the pistol. Mm-hmm. So he uses it as a way to get out in another way. But, but yeah, I thought that was a pretty successful and powerful scene.
Yeah, and from that we switch to the teenager perspective, going back in time, probably to the beginning of the film as far as the chronology goes, because they're screwing around with some fireworks and a sex doll in some silly scene, and then suddenly cops come up on the roof of the building where they are and tell them to get out of there. And then they go downstairs, they see the SWAT guys going in, they see a couple of other people acting shady and decide to follow them. A guy who's already identified himself as being Jennifer's dad, I think, somehow through other dialogue in the movie. And he's talking to a fireman, and then those two guys run off, and so the kids follow them into the sewer, and then somehow, really accidentally, it seems like, fumble their way into the apartment building.
Right. I have to say, though, I mean, yeah, I know teenagers are always like trying to look for adventure. And some of how they play this is that they're going to get rich off of the footage. So, and keep in mind, this is 2010 that they did this. So sort of, YouTube and all that stuff is out there, viral videos. We're definitely well into that realm of things. But I have to say, if you see a SWAT team and a hazmat, sort of like a hazmat situation, are you going to try to get into that building? I don't care how stupid you are as a teenager. I don't see them doing this. So I found that, this is what I was saying, like I found this particular story to be a little bit implausible. And I feel like it weakened the story overall. Like I don't think they even needed to show all of this with the teenagers. I think they could have just had them in the building and said that they got in there on a dare, and that probably would have been a lot more successful than some of this stuff. But I guess they also had to show Jennifer's dad and all that. But I just felt like this was the weakest point in the story.
The original film does mention the fact that there's someone who's come back from the pharmacy for one of the people in the apartment building, right? Like, I'm pretty sure that her dad is mentioned on the
Several
radio
times.
or something.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So to have his character kind of also get tied up as a loose end is important, I think, for this overall story, where now there's no real worry that there's still an unknown vector outside of the apartment building by the time the story ends, in a way.
Right, but there's ways to do this. There was very simple ways you could have done this with him without necessarily showing everything that they did.
Hmm.
But maybe it was a way to show what was going on outside the building. I just felt like the teenagers' storyline specifically was a little bit silly.
It's annoying, like because they're annoying characters.
That too.
They're arguing all the time. The poor girl gets totally dragged along, and she doesn't even want to be there. And then they get stuck in there, and she's not psyched. In fact, am I right in thinking that her and the other guy, they never really tell us what happens to them?
They don't.
Yeah. But so for their perspective, they hook up with the guy with the bag and the fireman. The guy with the bag is weird and very distracted. The fireman is like, dependable fireman guy who's kind of like their dad. And they run around and get into all kinds of trouble. Kill a zombie with a firework. That was pretty cool. I think that was.
I actually wrote that down as a note. The the way that they film that, and with her sort of antics, like they put it in her mouth, and she just kind of like, as the firework basically goes off, the power from it, like as it's trying to like fly, I guess, just pushes her all around. So I thought that was that was a really inventive way to kill one of them off.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just thought that was kind of fun and silly and ridiculous, but I liked it.
And then they think they're gonna save Jennifer, who they've been hearing about from the dad, who's now dead, and they saw him get killed and thrown off the stairwell. But then they open a door that we recognize that has a rosary with a knife on it, and it turns out not to be Jennifer at all. And it's Martos' second scene of standing menacingly just out of camera range.
Right.
And that doesn't go well either. And I think they kill him somehow, and I forget how. I think they found his gun. Oh God, no, that was an amazing scene. What am I doing forgetting that?
All right.
Remember when the girl picks up the pistol?
Yes.
And her hands are waving all over the place. And the fireman is like restraining Martos, and he's saying, shoot him, and she shoots him.
She does, but she's very upset about it. And actually, that was a part that I thought was very well done because, any normal person, especially like a teenager who's just been dragged into this crazy thing and doesn't know what's going on and has never held a gun in her life. I don't know that she would have had such good aim given how her hands are flying around, but her reaction to having shot him is like pretty good. She's like freaking out.
Because she shoots the fireman in the eye.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Not the zombie is the takeaway. So that's not good aim. That's the opposite of good aim.
Yeah, but I'm saying that even so, I don't know she would have even hit him. Like she
maybe not.
But in any case, her reaction is like anybody's would be like horrified that she's done this. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And with this scene, they introduce the idea that these demons, these possessed people, they're adding more to the canon so they can imitate voices, and that's going to be very important later on.
Right. Well, yeah, right, exactly. So in this scene, they show us that they can do this impersonation thing, and then later on, very important. It's after they just killed their fireman dad and the zombie Martos that the rest of the cops roll up, what's left of them, and they're like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And we've been seeing that the camcorder the teenagers have been using has been running low on battery, like that's been flashing in the corner, and. At this point, the perspective also switches back to Rosso, and they start to interview Ori soon after this, who has been bitten. And they lock up the girl and the other kid in like a closet somewhere.
Yeah. Like
that's the last we see of those two, but we hear them banging on the door. And then we're interviewing Ori, and suddenly, out of nowhere...
He flips.
He does flip. He tells him to go upstairs and everything, but also out of nowhere, lady from the first movie just shows up.
Yeah, and they do it in kind of a cool way because, like, she shows up and she's standing creepily there, just like everybody else has been. So I'm kind of surprised that they didn't just shoot her outright.
Mm-hmm.
But then they take a look at her and say she's okay, and I mean she's acting kind of weird. I will tell you, just from what we have been seeing here, I don't know that I would have trusted her compared to other things. And, if you just take a look at her, like her whole shirt is covered with blood. She's not in great shape.
But she has a camera, which they need because all their other cameras are breaking.
And there's interesting sort of exchanges. So they get the information that the original carrier is in the penthouse,
But
and
hiding in the darkness or something, like you can't see her.
yeah, so they
Light
introduce
blinds you.
the light blinds you. They introduce that idea, and then our original camera woman, reporter woman, is basically saying that they keep asking her how she saw it, and she's like, well, I used the night, or they surmise that she used the night vision on the camera. So you know there is that part. This is the thing, though. Anybody who saw the beginning of the film is going to be a little skeptical about this person, but she's
Hmm.
acting more normally than anybody else we've seen infected, so that's a little different. So, I mean, but you don't really, I mean, at least I, as a viewer, did not trust her presence here. It seemed a little strange, and, you know, anytime I see a character really pushing for something specific, which she was, um, I doubted her motives basically. So, um, kind of was just waiting for something weird to happen with her from the minute she appeared.
Yeah, I held out hope that she wasn't gonna be a mole or a bad guy. Like how maybe she just got away in like a real happy accident, but it doesn't seem that way. They go upstairs and it's like she had told them that the only way that they could see anything or the evil creature was through this night sight that she has on her camera, which none of the rest of them have. So they all went up there knowing full well that only Rosso or whoever had the camera would be able to see anything. They
Right.
find a door where there hadn't been a door, and then they find like yet another
Well,
lab. Yet another lab, right?
I know. How
This
many labs does this building have?
and they've broken through walls clearly, so like they're in another building, I think. Um, it's yeah, the scope of this just keeps growing, but apparently it's all self-contained because we find out at the end they still need their only exit is through the front door.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, and also on the night scope, Rosso can see a bathtub eventually, and the chief finally doesn't have anybody left to order to go do it for him, so
So
he
has to do
goes
it himself. Oh no.
he goes to find in the pitch black, like, oh, okay, you see something. Russo's also very not descriptive. He's like, I see something. What do you see? It's over there. Like,
Over
that's
there.
not
No.
what is it? Just tell him it's a bathtub. We can all tell it's a bathtub.
Yeah.
But the chief is just like feeling around in pitch blackness, and he has a very kind of like ignominious death, just dragged into a bathtub that then, when they turn the lights on, isn't there anymore.
Hmm.
But then really, really creepy, skinny zombie lady shows back up and goes around hitting people with hammers. But I don't think she gets to kill any of them. It's just that she messes them up. Like they're all dark in the dark. Rosso's still alive somehow. I thought she hit him with a hammer and then he was dead. But then he drops the camera and then you still hear him talking. Like he's like, I
Right.
don't know where the camera is. Eventually, the woman Angela is I don't know how you say her name in
And
Spanish,
Hella.
but that Angela, her character walks up to the creepy zombie lady and blows her head off with a shotgun. Owen is very upset by this because he's like, no, we needed her blood. And then suddenly it seems like Angela is becoming more and more aggressive, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing, though, and I should also mention once again that Javier Botet, who plays the super creepy Tristana Medeiros, he's the same actor that played her in REC1, and we see photos of what Tristana supposedly looked like before all this happened, and
She
I
wasn't
guess
8 feet tall, yeah.
she was not 8 feet tall. The emaciation and the makeup and everything that they do here is honestly just incredible. So whether you believe it's her or not, this is one hell of a scary acting and makeup job. Like it's really, it blew me away again this time. It's terrifying. So I was very relieved with when Angela blows her head off because I was just like, that thing's got to go. It's
I
terrifying.
didn't think it was as scary in this version as the last one.
Well, we see more of her in this one, which maybe also, and we also were, I don't know, I was kind of waiting for her to appear. The first one I think is scarier because we see limited shots of her, and they kind
Yeah.
of make her appear, much like Jaws and the shark in Jaws. She sort of
Yeah.
slowly makes her appearance, and it's almost like that kind of Bigfoot footage where you don't see everything, and that makes it a little scarier. In this one, we see a lot more of her, and it's, to me, she's still scary, but more just I was very impressed by the makeup and the body, whatever they're doing with this body here is kind of like disturbing, but yeah, and Hella blows this thing away, and I was like, well, why would she do that? And then I'm like, contagion, she's already infected and wants to get out, and I was correct.
Yeah, you called it, and then she shoots Rosso, who's never hurt anybody because all he's done is hold a camera, and he has a very like we never even really know what he looks like. It's kind of sad, poor Rosso.
I know.
And then Owen gets got. She tries to get him to give the order, and he's like no, and then he figures it out finally
Yeah.
at the last minute, and then she's like, I don't need you anyway, because well, she never needed anybody. I don't know why she even ever hooked up with these guys. She could have just been like, yeah, I'm coming out.
Yeah,
Like,
and I
she,
mean,
she needed his radio, but
she used radio, but she could have done that long ago, and she could have taken out all these people long ago. They didn't even need to go upstairs, and she could have had like the original zombie hanging out there. So this was kind of silly, I thought. The only thing I guess I could think is that she wanted to have like, yeah, I don't know, overall vengeance on Owen. Throughout the film, a lot of the possessed people are basically saying how they know him and how he won't give up and all this other stuff. So maybe she's just playing the long game to just make his failure totally absolute. It is a pretty scary. Owen does not have a good ending. Like, blood's kind of coming out of his mouth. He's like, how'd you do it? And then there's the whole creepy thing where she has to speak into the radio with his voice, which we've seen before, and where we've seen the imitation, and that's how she's going to get out. And that sort of sets us up for the next. There's. I thought there was only one other one, but I guess there's two more. Correct?
oh yeah, there's two more.
And she's a great actor. I mean, I think she plays this possessed thing pretty well. But it's successful, but doesn't make a ton of sense to me, as you said. Just why you would go through all of this.
I feel like one of the things you know about demonic possession is that they can speak in different voices, right? So why have a voice activated
I don't know.
system? It seems a little funny, but honestly, yeah, maybe the third act suffers a little bit by this like inexplicable return of a character from the first film who then turns out to be bad. Like, sure, but I feel like even with all the jumping back and forth, this is a frenetically paced movie that has a lot of jump scares. It has a lot of people making stupid decisions, but that's just horror.
It's got a lot of zombie children hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah.
It definitely was successful in that. And I enjoyed it. And as I said, I agree with you. I think that it's surprising to me that this didn't win more awards. And I definitely feel like it's surprising to me that this doesn't have more of like a niche audience compared to a lot of films that we've seen. And also considering that this is a sequel. Like I do feel like despite some of the softer parts or the weaker parts of the plot lines, it is very enjoyable to watch in terms of like just from a movie making perspective and a makeup perspective. And I really liked it. I did, again, as you know, the possessed children cannot. It's my least favorite part of this kind of genre, but even with that, I think it was very successful in being entertaining.
I really like this. I want to watch the other two. I think we might need to give you a mental health break.
Yeah, I don't think I need a break between the next between this one and 3, which is called like Genesis or something.
Yeah.
Rec cubed Genesis.
So okay. Good film, heartily recommended. And so, AJ, I have a proposal. What do you think about watching next a 1980s B-movie classic, Maniac Cop.
I am all for it. It's got Bruce Campbell in it, so I'm always all for Bruce Campbell. I don't know that you'll be as excited about that because I know you don't quite have the love for him that I do, but 80s cop zombie film. Go for it.
I'm a big fan of Bruce Campbell. I'll have you know. I was watching recently. I was watching an episode of X-Files that he was in.
Oh, I love that episode.
And speaking of demons, yeah, he was a demon, or like or a devil or something in that episode, and it's a good episode. It's good classic X-Files and classic Bruce Campbell.
Yeah, he's always a classic. I'll even sometimes stoop to watching Burn Notice just to see him in it. And he's pretty good in it too. So.
Yeah, that show is all right. That show is all right. But yeah, so next time on Reanimated, hook up with us again for episode 133 when we're going to do Maniac Cop. And remember how great maybe it was in the 90s that movie came out. Either way.
No. It's definitely in the 80s. I think it's like late 80s. Hang on. Let me check. 1988.
88. What a year. So yeah, hook up with us then. In the meantime, you can get a hold of us on Twitter at reanimatedpcast, email reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, and online at reanimatedpodcast.com. So until then, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later.
Ciao.